In most states, if you get hit by a baseball or bat or something else at a game, that baseball won't be held responsible. Everyone, thanks for coming back to Foul Ball Safety Now. Another day-to-day show that we do here talking about foul balls. Today is August 12th, 2025. We're excited to bring on a lawyer comedian guest in a few minutes. Before we go there, I'd like to discuss some news at Foul Ball Safety Now. I'm also joined by Brianna Ludwig. So Brianna will be joining us in a minute as well. So some news this week. There's a new trial coming in Florida, in Tampa. There's a little girl that was struck by a baseball bat a number of years ago, and I actually attended the first day of the trial yesterday, and they were doing jury selection, so I will probably be back in a few days to see opening statements. Should be very interesting. Also, in Modesto, California, there was news of a settlement in a case where a woman was unfortunately struck by a baseball outside a ballpark. The terms of the settlement were not released, but typically when these cases are settled, the plaintiff agrees to a non-disclosure agreement, and they may not be able to talk about certain aspects or how much money they may have recovered. So we'll try to follow up on that. And then there's also a situation playing out in Queens, New York, Queens College, where I'm in touch with one of my attorneys. We're trying to figure out how to get in a dialogue with the Queens College administration based on the fact that the student athletes are worried and concerned that one of them could hit a ball outside the ballpark where the elementary school kids are typically walking because the public school is on the campus of the Queens College baseball field. So that situation is going to also play out. You can see at Foul Ball Safety Now a lot of the stuff that we are going to talk about. It will also be on the website, and it'll take you a few minutes to get caught up on what we've done so far from 2019 to the present time. So great. Everyone is here and everyone's ready to talk. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest today. And for those joining for the first time, the format is the tables are turned. So our guests for the majority of the podcast will be asking us questions. So we're really excited today because we have an attorney, part-time comedian. He's an actor, but he clearly is an attorney from California, Elliot Nazarian. Hi, Elliot. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. How's everyone doing?
Great.
Hi, everyone.
All right, great, terrific. So, Elliot, we're ready and looking forward to hearing your questions and just take it from here.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great to me. The first thing that kind of has struck out to me, with everything you're doing is just kind of like just interesting to me, like a niche, like specific issue. And it's always interesting to see people become so passionate about things that are kind of under the radar. So I guess my first question would kind of just be like an origin, just what first made you realize that the lack of proper netting was such a serious safety issue. Was there like a particular game or incident that stuck with you? Or, it would just be interesting to kind of find out how this all started, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I guess the first time I really got wind of the issue was over 20 years ago when I was with a group of people in Brooklyn, New York, near Coney Island, and we were at a Cyclones game, and we were standing outside, and a ball came over the back of the ballpark where we were standing, and it hit one of the people we were with in the forearm. And that was incredible. It was actually a child. Yeah, it left a mark on his arm. I think one of the group we were with got the ball, but it was raised the questions like, this is interesting how business is being conducted at baseball games where foul balls are leaving the ballpark every game. And then research led years later to finding out how many windows may have been broken in parking lots and just how often the ball goes over the sides. So I guess it started back then, and then I got more involved in 2019, and it's been a 6-year journey since.
It's like so obvious, like when you look at a baseball, like it's such a hard ball and it's flying at such fast speeds. People get injured just getting hit by a pitch. It's interesting that it's been such a long time that this game has been going on. It's America's pastime. It's been going on since the 1800s. So it's interesting to me that this remains an issue. What do you think is taking so long for any changes to be implemented when it comes to foul ball safety? Do you think it has to do with fans worrying that the extended netting could ruin the view? or take away from the experience in some way? What's really happening? Why has it taken over 100 years for something that seems pretty obvious to be implemented?
Yeah. So I think what we can all determine if we go back like the last 55 years since a 14-year-old boy died at Dodger Stadium was that most people weren't really aware of the regularity of how often straight line drives are coming into certain sections. And I feel like if they did, there would have been a different evolution of how netting would have been taken care of. Because we're 55 years later, and unfortunately, we're still in dark times because I'm aware of injuries occurring regularly. So the game is a very good game, but it's been missing the transparency, which the general public should have been alerted to years ago. And I have a feeling that internally, baseball just has not really been able to deal with it because if all of a sudden nets popped up and there was independent netting councils that determined how high, far, wide the nets needed to be, would it be determined that in the last 55 years those steps should have been taken? I think yes. I think there was enough data and information that really would have implied that upgrades should have happened a lot sooner. And solutions are getting an independent body to come in and determine this is exactly where the nets need to be, or this is where the questions still remain, or this still is an unknown situation. Our job is to put it all on the table, Elliot, so others can determine for themselves. I believe there's points of entry for lawyers to step into this matter, from the baseball rule, which is the assumption of risk recognized in most states, that if you get hit by a baseball or bat or something else at a game, that baseball won't be held responsible. But I'll let you expand.
Yeah, and I do want to touch on this question as well. I think this is also a case where baseball as a corporation and the legal system has really failed Americans. And there are many different ways to silence people. And I think the baseball rule has done a lot of harm and damage to victims coming forward with their stories because they go through the system, and most of the time, unless their case is very high profile that involves a child that is very seriously injured or a death, they can't even get a lawyer that will be willing to work on the case because they know that the odds of them winning are very low. And so it's an underreported issue in general, and people don't realize how often it happens. But also, the general attitude online is there's a lot of victim blaming, which I believe has been perpetrated by the MLB as well, because if you look on their social media accounts, way before they got a lot of bad press in 2019, they would post videos making fun of people who were getting hit by foul balls. And so this attitude of victim blaming has started online where it's like the get off your phone. But the reality is nobody should be in harm's way to begin with. And people who are staring directly at the game cannot get out of the way in time. People just need more education on the topic to understand that. But we put out a report just yesterday on foulballsafetynow.com that documents all of the fan injuries we've discovered this season alone, and it's quite damning. So
Yeah, that's super interesting. Whenever you start to take into account kind of like the MLB's perspective and the strings they might be pulling, behind the scenes. Do you think that public attitudes towards safety in baseball have changed in recent years? Has it still been kind of an uphill battle to get people to take this more seriously?
Well, it doesn't help that ESPN puts out a video, which you all can see at Foul Ball Safety Now in 2019, which we call Exhibit A, had 700,000 views back in 2019, and it had 4,000 comments. And obviously, if that continued to air on TV, it would have gotten a lot more engagement and a lot more publicity and traction. But it went from all of that engagement to very little, because I think ESPN maybe felt pressure from their partner in broadcasting, MLB, to not show that 5-minute video. But the comments, the 4,000 comments, most of them were from the biased sports fan, maybe a little bit of a knucklehead climate, people saying things like, get off your phone, and why are you bringing kids to the game? Well, we were supposed to bring our kids to the game. Nobody told us not to bring our kids to the game. Even for anyone who's a former baseball player and has his instincts intact, they too don't want to be there with their families on their night off. They know that it's not conducive for the regular general public. And baseball players have shared with us privately or through interviews that they tell their own family members not to sit in those sections.
Right.
Why everyone else?
Right. And to that point, other sports like hockey have already addressed these risks and have expanded protective glass. So it makes you wonder, like, why has baseball clung so tightly to the assumption of risk argument and putting all of this effort into balancing and keeping these instances off of television and stuff like that instead of just updating its own safety approach?
You said it. It's like that video was from 2019, which clearly demonstrated that line drives just past end of dugouts are inappropriate for any age because we saw direct hits of balls hitting children. In 2025, there were approximately 40 cities that started the 2025 season without netting past end of the dugouts. So we all heard of the Yankees and the Mets and the Dodgers and the Giants. Those are 30 major league clubs, but nobody talks about the 169 other professional teams where there are also big guys hitting balls at 100 just past end of dugouts as well. And we also have a new feature, a new tab on the website, Foul Ball Safety Now, Exhibit A1, which is a math report. We've revisited a report put out by 538 in 2019, and it really does demonstrate, after we've taken a look at the report and what we've put into it in 2025, that there are thousands of foul balls per game, per year, 350,000 foul balls. We used a calculation of how many of those 350,000 balls may be going at warp speed just past end of dugouts. You should all study it. It's math. Once you see Exhibit A1, you'll see there's 2,460 MLB games a year, but there's also 14,000 other professional games every year. And with MLB saying the average game had 53 foul balls per game in 2019, the person I've been working with, Brendan, who's my research guy, determined just by 25 foul balls per game and 14,000 other games, that's 350,000 foul balls. And there are charts demonstrating the percentages of balls where they go. And a lot of them, unfortunately, go just past end of dugouts. Are they all going at 90 or 100? Probably not, but a lot are. And that's the problem. That's just one obvious demonstration of the problem. So we encourage everyone to look for themselves.
Now, have you looked at how leagues in Japan and Korea and other popular baseball countries handle netting? Because this makes me wonder, baseball in America, at least, is so heavily influenced by superstition and tradition. And, there's teams like the Yankees that don't let their players grow beards, for example. And there's just all these funky little superstitious rules that different teams employ. And it just makes me wonder if it's an American thing and they just don't want to mess around with the way things have been.
I do believe, from the legal side in 1970, it must have been the lawyers for all the teams and the commissioner's office would determine how to proceed, like after somebody died at a Dodger game in 1970. And they do want to preserve tradition for sure. And were they worried about addressing the problem full speed ahead in 1970 and going forward, based on 99% of the people, certainly in 1970, would say they don't want to have nets in front of their faces because the nets of 1970 may not be the nets of 2025, where most people who've seen the nets from 2025, they don't even know they're there. The technology is expanded. So was there some of that in their minds because netting technology wasn't fully developed yet? And people may say, hey, this doesn't look good, feel good. And they didn't want to finally give us the truth about what was reality. So it does raise all these questions. And unfortunately, we have to continue in aggression mode and try to learn the legacy of what should have been transparent and what could have been transparent. And we believe they failed. When you hear things from time to time, when management says things like, this could have been from 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we'll share with people at Foul Ball Safety Now and other conversations. We have have enough data that shows that management of teams have been saying things like, our fans have been telling us they don't want the netting. But I think the fans would have also appreciated an honest discussion about what the realities were, and then we would all compromise. And we would all learn finally, once everything was put on the table, exactly what needs to be moved right away. And if adults want to continue with status quo lack of netting, maybe that's okay. Similar to like running with the Bulls in Spain. If you're 18 and older and you want to deal with the obvious threat, you can, but you're not allowed to bring the little guys in Spain, and you're not allowed to bring potentially the little guys to the games in America. So all of these things could happen. We should have had these conversations. We should have developed these conversations, nurtured these conversations. I think regulation would have been in long ago if we finally had this transparency. Every winter, baseball has intimate knowledge about what to be expected in the spring and the summer, and they've not shared that information with us. They know exactly how many foul balls are coming at people's heads, and we need to discuss all of that.
Great point, Jordan. Fans voting against netting, fine, but have they made an informed decision? Are they saying that they want or don't want netting before or after they're fully educated about the risks and have seen the statistics and have seen what can happen when there is no netting in place? It's almost equivalent to a child not wanting to wear a seatbelt. You can say you don't want netting, but are you really educated and informed on why netting would be a good idea before you're just so quick to make that statement that you don't want netting? So I think a big goal of Foul Ball Safety Now has been just to educate people. Jordan often says putting the unknown factors on the table.
Yeah, and to that point, you mentioned that the Modesto case was just settled. Do you think that the confidentiality of these settlements is hurting the push for better safety measures when it comes to just transparency and people really understanding the gravity of the situation?
Absolutely. That's the whole narrative in itself. All these years, how many NDAs were signed? How many cases that the general public never learned about? So I think, we're going to find out as many cases as we can find that have been settled because it is factual. We may not know exactly the people or the parties got, but there are a lot of proceedings before trials, and most of these cases never make it to trial. They only go through proceedings and then there's settlements. So the case in Tampa that's playing out right now, that's going to be exciting. They've been at it for like 6 years. This is a little girl that was injured over 5-6 years ago by a barrel of a baseball bat. And from the way it looked in the courtroom, there's a lot of files there and a lot of lawyers. So that's going to be interesting for the next recording, so I'll be able to give people updates on what I'm learning about the ongoing trial. Just started yesterday.
Do you think it will take some kind of catastrophic, high-profile case, something that shocks the public conscience for the law or the league to finally, make some sort of serious shift? Or do you think that these ongoing sporadic lawsuits will be enough if the right steps are taken?
I'm determined to keep foul balls and bats in the news, so I would hope that others will join me and be just as dedicated in getting to the bottom of all of it, because that's what we do in our country. We can certainly present everything from the past to the present. I've interviewed more than 70 people with the journalists I work with, Brendan, and most of these people have a lot to say, whether they've been injured, whether they're baseball players themselves. We've interviewed more than 30 baseball players, broadcasters, camera people. I do believe that all of these questions will be finally presented to a bigger forum, and I think, the mud on their face couldn't come soon enough to be exposed on how I look at MLB, because there's so many people within the baseball industry certainly should have been telling this story long ago. And they chose to stay in the game and not address what most people don't know, and the risks about the regularity of foul balls and bats going into the seats. And there's too many insiders that are aware of all of this, and they should have been doing more about it. And we're in 2025, and I've been using this term lately. We're still in the dark ages, and I hope, in 10 years from now, we can say something like, you remember those dark ages from back in 2025 and before, so that's where we're at. So we're in healthy aggression mode, Brianna and others who have been working with me. We're trying to make some news, and trying to keep this thing open for others to join in on learning. So, yeah, exciting to talk to you about this from a lawyer's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as a lawyer, having experience with like tort law and all of that, in practice, it just seems like case law alone is unlikely to directly force a stadium to take some action, like installing netting, just because courts don't typically issue, orders telling a business how to operate, especially in personal injury tort cases like these. So, given the interplay between tort law and, legislative intervention, do you envision all of these lawsuits to be a sufficient mechanism to evolve standard of care, or is the bigger picture some sort of statutory mandate that would overcome the assumption of risk doctrine and all these other issues?
Right. Probably the latter cause statute of mandate because they'll continue business as usual. This is a billion-dollar industry producing billions of dollars every year. And I think the settlements will continue. It's going to be very interesting how this case plays out because we only know of a few cases that went to trial, and including this one in Tampa regarding the little girl who was struck by the baseball bat. So I'm hoping, of course, that we're influential in legal circles. We do have a petition on the website at Foul Ball Safety Now for lawyers to potentially sign. We do have a pop-up notice on the website that asks lawyers to come on in to do pro bono work. And we believe there are points of entry for the lawyers in their particular states to show the local judges these videos that we have, maybe to determine that it's not age appropriate for little kids to be sitting in clearly dangerous zones, and maybe they'll be receptive, figure out how to get standing in those particular states where there's obviously lack of netting, potentially getting OSHA involved, which for those people who are not familiar with OSHA, it would be workplace matters where maybe, the 14 and the 15 and the 16-year-olds that are working for the first time, they don't know anything about protection in their place of work. So potentially OSHA would get involved and not allow teenagers working at these games anymore. So it would be really nice to get a group of people that are dedicated, figuring out how to get standing, figuring out how to get what agency to step up, and then getting hopefully all the lawyers in the United States who've been exposed to the baseball rule, maybe only for 15 minutes in their torts class, but certainly are baseball fans now and their parents. You would think, they should be watching baseball free and clear because they're aware of what most fans aren't aware of, which is the assumption of risk, the regularity of injuries, the fact of the matter that most of these fans that are struck by baseball have very little recourse because lawyers don't want to do the paperwork and find out that their case is not going to be accepted because those personal injury lawyers, there may be far and few between that are ready to get involved. But we're excited to keep this going, and this is really exciting that we're talking to you.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is fantastic. And I think it's really important. And it makes me wonder, how you envision this all playing out. I think that it's an interesting thing you're doing. And whenever you brought up that the ultimate goal would probably be some sort of statutory or legislative change, I guess it just seems that, the MLB is this multi-billion-dollar industry and they can handle sporadic lawsuits here and there and pay them off and keep going the way that they're going, right? We do envision this string of lawsuits and all of this pressure as some sort of catalyst for eventual systemic change, something that legislators could no longer ignore. For example, you're showing like a pattern of preventable harm through ongoing lawsuits. The financial pressure, I don't know if that would be enough given the massive industry, but maybe if these lawsuits are kind of generating public awareness and creating some sort of platform to bring in front of Congress, for example, is that the ultimate goal? And if so, how do you envision this all playing out?
So we welcome you and others week to week to come and adopt the cause. So, getting a coalition together and finding, that big fish that it doesn't worry about where the conversation leads to. They're just excited that they found out about it and now they're helping me move this conversation forward. It does take time. It does take money. It takes a movement. So we can do what we can do. We can keep on following the news and we can keep on having these discussions. And of course, I want to be one influential person that tells Brendan, Brianna, and I we'll take it from here. If I can certainly pass on the torch and inspire another movement with more influence, let's do it. It's all about preventing the black and blue marks ASAP. And Brendan, Brianna, and I could certainly talk about the past, forever. We feel like it's worthy of a conversation. It's worthy of having a permanent exhibit or a museum where everything we learned up until now should be displayed. Baseball wouldn't like to have that exhibit or museum, but that certainly is worthy of a discussion of putting all of our information into a place where people can come into an exhibit or a museum thinking one thing about foul balls, and then 5 minutes later, they'll come out thinking something totally different. Most people associate foul ball with fun, not flirting with danger or worse. And we'll do what we can to put that out there. So that's certainly something that I'm going to continue to do. But right now, it's about the news and it's about business as usual. It's the dark ages. And I want everyone to know that. And by us having these conversations, I'm confident more people will chime in and certainly have intelligent things to say, whether they're interested in baseball or whether they're not. They're going to be curious that we're doing this. So we'll keep on going.
Absolutely.
So, Elliot, how do you feel like legal accountability and public awareness work hand in hand? Just your perspective as a lawyer.
I think it depends on the context. For this particular situation, attorneys have a lot of leeway and a lot of personal reasons to take on a case. And, in court law specifically, a lawyer with his own business is not just going to take any case willy-nilly just because he feels like it. It's going to come down to the money involved, unless you're dealing with like a civil rights attorney or some other sort of, super niche kind of field of law. So I think that riling people together and getting awareness about something and really pushing on the aspects of a case outside of just the pure financial becomes really important in this arena. Finding the right people that are actually really passionate about the case and are willing to do it, maybe not pro bono per se, but people that are really interested in the case because of what it stands for and the values that it represents, more so than just the financial outcome, I think is the biggest thing there. So I think whenever you bring enough public awareness to a case like this, it definitely affects the legal component of it by just pushing the right buttons. But I also have one final question. To my eye, just based on like a preliminary understanding of the issue and just getting the bare bones, Spark Notes version of everything that's going on, it seems to me like the biggest obstacle here is winning over the fans and the executives and the people that are actually high up in the baseball industry. So what would you say to a fan or an executive who truly believes that extending netting takes something away from the game?
Well, starting with the fan, I would tell the fan that you need to try out the nets and you'll see, fortunately, we're in 2025, so you really won't have an issue. It's not like 1970 nets. So the adjustment will be so simple and so seamless. So give it a shot. So that's what I would more or less say to the fan of 2025. And in regarding management, I think they've done an injustice, regardless if it was 1971 or 2010 or 2018, by putting some word out there that, oh, our fans aren't interested in putting up netting. At the same time, management has access to the data that clearly demonstrate it's not appropriate for any human being to be sitting there. So I have a problem with management from 1971 to the present time of saying that, of putting that sentiment out there that their fans aren't interested. Did they spend 15 minutes over the winter informing them? Did they invite season ticket holders in every winter time to inform them that this is the reality of what we're facing, whether netting sucks or whether it doesn't? Should we be allowing the little ones to sit here? So I have a problem with that because they have access to the data and they're putting out messages. And I think it's inconsistent and it's wrong that they would even put out those messages. If they're saying something like, oh, our fans don't want nets and they've been telling us whatever the year may have been, and they leave out that we're sitting on this information and we're not even incorporating that into their concerns. Unacceptable. That's their legacy. That's what I will be displaying as best as I can. I'm upset with the community of baseball for not being transparent for all these years.
I really think it's a matter of education. I truly believe in my heart there is not a single baseball fan who could be seriously, truly educated on the gravity of this issue and would still be against netting. I mean, people have died, people have been blinded, not able to ever see their children's face again, not able to ever see the people that they love again. How could that be worth anything? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
Well, I think that this is how any change really happens. It starts with getting it in front of people's eyeballs, getting people aware of it. And especially in today's day and age, with social media and AI and everything that's going on, I think the way you guys are going about it is definitely the best way to do it. Getting in front of people, getting on people's phones, getting on people's social media, making sure people are understanding what's happening. And it all really starts from there. So I think you guys are doing a terrific job. And I hope for the best for you and for everything that you have planned.
We appreciate that. Okay, that was great. Thank you so much to our guest, Elliot Nazarian. Thank you, Brianna. I thought this was a really informed discussion. I hope everyone could tune in for the next time. And also, please check out foulballsafetynow.com and look at all our latest news. It won't take you too long to find out the whole history of Foul Ball Safety Now. There's a lot of articles, a lot of press releases you can follow, and other stories that we didn't get to today. So thanks again, and until next time.